Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for this last edition of the Student Media Elections Workshop. My name is Andy Lee, and I am a communications advocate with Southern Coalition for Social Justice. Today, we are going to be talking about campus issues that are in the sort of political landscape this year as we head into the election. But before we get started, I wanted to make some space for the um, victims of Hurricane Helene. I am from Boone, North Carolina, and I have many friends still in the region. My entire family still lives there. And although thankfully all of them are safe and sound, I know many people are not. And even with all of the outpouring of support, it's going to take years work and continued support from all of us to help that region. So I just wanted to drop in the chat some resources. SCSJ has opened up a crisis line for people who need help navigating the FEMA application for aid, as well as people needing help locating loved ones who are currently incarcerated, as well as some donation links to helping regional organizations and mutual aid efforts. Um, I'll also drop in the chat SCSJ's YouTube. That is where all of these trainings will be posted, and they will be available for anyone who is unable to attend this webinar. But with all of that table setting kind of done, I'm going to toss it over to our wonderful presenters this afternoon.
Thanks, Andy. I'll just start. I'll introduce myself. I'm Lily. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm a voting rights legal fellow with the Southern Coalition for Social Justice. And I'll pass it to Caitlin to introduce herself.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Caitlin. My pronouns are she, her. I am the policy director at Democracy North Carolina, and I'm really excited to talk with you this afternoon about campus voting and how to get involved in elections this season. And I'll pass it back to Lily.
Oh, all right. So I'll start sharing my screen. Let's see. So our goal for today is to cover kind of a wide range of issues that affect student voters and issues that we get a lot of questions from student voters, parents, and hopefully provide some information that is helpful to all of you student journalists as you navigate the election season. We know that your reporting and information you can provide to your communities on the voting system are really helpful for your communities. Voting can get really confusing for people, and so we want to provide as much resources, information, and knowledge as possible for you all. So this is kind of an outline of the issues we'll talk about today. Some parts of the general voting process, like eligibility, registration, voting methods, and then, like I said, some of the key topics and main issues that we often get questions about from student voters. So that includes things like photo ID, documents for registration, and kind of other general areas of voting rights. So we'll start with some information about just eligibility for voting. There are a few requirements for eligibility in North Carolina, so voters have to be a US citizen. You must be 18 by election day. You have to have lived at your current address for at least 30 days before election day, and so that for the general election in 2024 is October 6th. And you also cannot be currently serving a felony sentence or any period of post-sentence parole or supervision. One question we get a lot on this from students is on that residency piece and living at your address for at least 30 days before the election. Students often have questions about whether they can register at their college, and the answer is yes. Students can claim their college as their residence as long as they intend to stay there after college, or if they aren't sure what their plan is after college. So if they have lived there for at least 30 days and plan to stay or aren't sure their plans after school, students can register in their college community. If students plan to return home, they should register at that location. And they should, register at their former home. So that is kind of the general overview of that. I know that can get kind of confusing for students, but the broad overview is yes, you can register there, and it's often a common question that we get from both students and parents. And just going over the main ways to vote in North Carolina, voters have 3 ways to cast their election, or cast their ballot on election day. So it's either on election day in person, which is Tuesday, November 5th. Polls will be open from 6:30 to 7:30 p.m. on election day. You can also cast your ballot during early voting, which begins on Thursday, October 17th and ends Saturday, November 2nd at 3 p.m. Election day sites and hours are going to vary a bit by county. This is going to be especially true following the hurricane, especially in western counties. You'll probably see some updates to early voting out there, but in general, it's going to be different county to county, and we'll provide a resource at the end of this presentation so that you can look up your early voting location, times, and all of that. Important to note with that too, you can vote at any early voting location in the county you're registered during early voting. You don't have to just vote at a certain precinct, so you can choose which location in your county is most accessible and easiest for you to get to. And a lot of college campuses do have early voting locations on campus. This is not true for election day, so just to make sure on election day, you do have to go to your assigned precinct. And again, there are resources at the end of this presentation for you to review and see where you're able to vote. The last option for casting your ballot is voting by mail. We have no excuse absentee ballot casting in North Carolina, so you don't need a reason to vote by mail. Anyone can request an absentee ballot. That ballot request has to be received by Tuesday, October 29th at 5 p.m. Because of mail delays, especially important to try and get that in as early as possible. If you know you want to vote by mail, that request is already open. Absentee ballots have started going out, so do try to get those requests in earlier rather than later so that you have time to receive the ballot and return it. And when you return your ballot, those voted ballots have to be received by the end of voting on election day. So that is November 5th at 7:30 p.m. Again, highlighting that the ballots have to be received that day. It used to be postmark requirements. That is not the case anymore. It has to be in hand received by that day. To go into voting by mail a little bit more, here are some resources for requesting your absentee ballot. Again, there's a deadline October 29th for receiving that, and the return deadline on November 5th. There are a few different ways that you can return your absentee ballot. You can mail it back, and there is a postage requirement for that is about 3 stamps. You can also drop your absentee ballot off at any early voting location during early voting or at your county board of elections. You can't drop off your ballot to your voting location on election day, though. It has to be brought back to the county board, or to the county board's office on election day. And if you do choose to mail your ballot, North Carolina State Board of Elections provides a ballot tracking link. It's called Ballot Tracks. That is linked on the slideshow here. And that's a great resource. You can sign up for text or email alerts for your ballot, and you can follow it throughout and make sure it is received and counted by your county board. Your county board will also notify you if they have issues with the ballot so that you are able to either vote a new ballot or cure any of those issues. Another note, we'll get into photo ID a little bit more in just a minute, but when you vote by mail, photo ID is required. Your ballot will have some instructions about how to provide that, but there will be a separate envelope that you get with your absentee envelope that you should put either a photocopy of your photo ID in or a photo ID exception form. One of the two is going to be required for your absentee ballot. The last note is make sure that you have two witnesses or a notary sign your ballot return envelope. So your witnesses can be anyone who's 18 or older and not a candidate for election, unless it is a near relative, which could be someone like your dad, your sister, your mom, something like that. And those witnesses, you either need two to sign or a notary public, and a notary public cannot charge a fee for notarizing your ballot. And I think with that, I'll pass it to Caitlin to overview some photo ID requirements.
Thank you, Lily. And I will just say, speaking from personal experience, I just ordered my absentee ballot, and it has been a really transparent process. I've been getting text and email notifications about where my ballot is in the cycle. And so if you are concerned about, where is it, where's my absentee ballot, ballot tracks and the services that our state provide for tracking that ballot make it as easy as waiting for a package. But let's talk about voter photo ID. And so voter photo ID is required when voting in North Carolina. And this is going to be the first major election that voter photo ID is required. So that means that if you are presenting to vote, whether by mail or in person, you are going to need to show some form of ID. That said, there are exceptions to this rule. And so a thing to think about is you can still vote without an ID. On the slide in front of you, we have the full list of acceptable IDs. Thinking about students, student IDs must be approved by the State Board of Elections. And so this means that not all student IDs are acceptable for voting purposes. And that can be tricky because we know, for example, certain counties may have multiple schools or universities, and not all of those schools or universities may have an acceptable ID. But the State Board of Elections has a really great list and a searchable list of what schools have been approved for using their IDs for voting purposes. So make sure that before you go to the polls, just double check that your student ID is acceptable. Don't make that assumption. Another important tip and reminder in thinking about voter photo ID is out-of-state license. Some out-of-state license can be acceptable if you registered within 90 days of the election. And so this year, that date is August 7th. And so if you have registered by August 7th, and you are an out-of-state student who is using your college community as your residency for the reasons that Lily described, whether you are staying here permanently or you're unsure where you're going to be residing after college, you may use that out-of-state ID as long as you've registered by August 7th for this election. Other common photo IDs like a US passport, or one other option for students is a free photo ID at your county boards of elections. And so all county boards of elections in North Carolina are required to provide a free photo ID. And to get that free photo ID, you need to be a registered voter in that county and provide your name, date of birth, social security number, and take a photograph. Just important, we know that not all students know their social security number. And so before going to get that free photo ID, if you know a friend, just make sure that they have talked with their parents or their loved one about getting that social security number. Another thing to keep in mind with getting a free photo ID, they cannot be issued between the end of early voting and election day. And so if you are showing up to the polls on election day and don't have that ID, don't fret, because remember, you can still vote without an ID, and we'll get into that right now. Next slide. Thank you, Lily. So if you don't have a photo ID, your option is going to be voting a provisional ballot. And a provisional ballot in the voting rights community is considered to be a fail-safe voting option, which means that, for example, if you don't meet the voter eligibility requirements or don't meet the legal requirements to vote in North Carolina, so for example, you do not show a photo ID, you'll be offered a provisional ballot. And in the context of voter photo ID, when you vote a provisional ballot, you have to decide between two options for your voting. So you can use an ID exception form, or you can return back to the County Board of Elections by November 14th and provide that acceptable ID. And there's also another alternative that folks may also utilize, which is, for example, if you're with your friends and you're going to the polls and you're about to enter the polling place, just make sure that you all check to see if you have that ID. And if you are lucky to have a campus voting site, you might be just easy for you to turn back and go to your dorms or off campus housing and get that ID and come back. But just be mindful of the time. I know sometimes we say, oh, we'll just go back, and that doesn't happen. And we really need to make sure, especially young people, have their voice heard this election and are not accidentally disenfranchised by not showing ID. And we also know from data collected by Southern Coalition for Social Justice and Democracy North Carolina that when voters vote without an ID and they use the option of having completing an ID exception form, that is going to be the most reliable way to have your vote count. And again, this is because you don't have to do any additional steps to make sure that ballot is counted compared to, for example, voting a provisional ballot and returning back to the County Board of Elections. You are going to have to take that extra step to find transportation, to go to your county boards of elections, take that time, whether it's from work or school or an internship, and show that ID before November 14th. And so sometimes, voting is complicated, and so the ID exception form makes it less complicated and allows you to have a one-stop shop when you're voting at the polling place. And just remembering when we'll talk about this at the end of our presentation, but just encourage people to bring that ID if they have one and to use that exception form if not. Again, there is going to be options if you forget that ID when you present to vote. And so let's go over the ID exception form because if you haven't seen this form or if you haven't voted in North Carolina, it might be daunting. And, as Lily noted, knowledge is power. And so as student journalists, we can provide you a copy of this ID exception form. It is a public document. If you are interested in, trying to report on how we can ensure students are empowered when voting with photo ID. And so a couple things to note about the ID exception form. Voters will have a couple different options to choose from when they're unable to present or forgot a photo ID when voting. And so this first chunk, exception 1, reasonable impediment, all that means is there was a reason why that you could not show ID. And there are several different options such as transportation, work, or family responsibilities, or school schedule. Another one is I applied for an ID but have not received it yet. We know, for example, in North Carolina, the DMV is backlogged and is causing a lot of frustrations and issues with folks receiving an ID in time for voting. So that might be something frequent for students as well. And then this fourth option, another reasonable impediment. This is a great option if you are a student and you're like, maybe I just forgot my ID. Or if you're a UNC Chapel Hill student and you still have a digital ID, that would be a reason to put on in the other box as well. Like I only have a digital ID. And so important to remember though with this other box is you have to check that box and actually write the reason in. And finally, it's important that you must sign this form. And I also want to recognize in light of Hurricane Helen, that there is an option available for students and family members, loved ones, other voters in this Exception 3 victim of a natural disaster. Both President Biden and Governor Cooper have declared a natural disaster in North Carolina. And so if you are someone who is in App State, this would be an option that you could utilize if you don't have a photo ID. And then just on the back end, what happens once I complete this form? Am I good to go? In most cases, yes, because if you have completed the form truthfully, the County Board of Elections should unanimously count your ballot, and you should be able to go on your way. But if you're unsure about this process, you can always connect back with Summon Coalition and Democracy North Carolina at 888 our vote, and we can make sure to get you the correct information. And just some other like random things about voter photo ID that is good to keep in mind, especially for students. The first, your address on your photo ID, such as your driver's license, doesn't have to match the address on your registration. So we know, for example, in North Carolina, that there are universities and colleges all over the state, and that students may decide to stay in the state, but may be from Orange County and then going to Wake County to attend NC State. And you may have on your driver's license your home address, which is in Orange County, but now you are residing in Wake County. Your address on your ID does not need to match your voter registration. So that is something just to keep in mind. On the hotline that I just referenced, we have been getting a lot of calls from parents and students about this, wanting to confirm that they don't need to update their ID. So remember, your address on your photo ID does not need to match your voter registration address. We'll also to remember, and Lily mentioned this, when you are voting by mail, you also need to provide a photo ID. But again, if you don't have an ID, you can still vote. And all mail-in ballots automatically come with that ID exception form that we showed on the previous slide. And so if you, for example, cannot photocopy your photo ID, you can complete the ID exception form. And want to also make a note before we move into the next topic about digital student IDs. This has been a topic in the news due to a recent lawsuit filed by the North Carolina Republican Party saying that digital IDs, such as UNC's Mobile One card, is not an acceptable ID under the law. Sadly, our appellate courts in North Carolina agreed with the NC GOP, and so at this time, digital IDs are not acceptable forms of voter photo ID. And so if you know of someone who is at UNC, please remind them, reach out to them, send them a text to get that physical one card at the one card office on campus. Those UNC is providing those for free. And so you can get your physical one card before voting begins. But again, you have lots of other options, such as that free photo ID at your county boards of elections, or that ID exception form. And so now I'm going to turn it back to Lily to talk about registering to vote.
Thanks, Caitlin. So the voter registration deadline is coming up on October 11th, but I just want to highlight, and this is, I think, really important for a lot of people who maybe that deadline sneaks by, it's during midterms, people are really busy. There are still options to register to vote same day during the early voting period, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in the minute. But there's just a few reminders that often slip by people when they are filling out that voter registration form. The form has a lot of things on it. All the required boxes on that form are going to be in red. And like the exception form that Caitlin went over, that is also a public document, so we can share a sample of what the voter registration form looks like if you are interested in sharing that and seeing what that looks like. So when you're filling out that form, it's important to go through all of those required sections and make sure they're filled out. A newer requirement is either providing your North Carolina driver's license number or your social security number on the form if you have one. If you don't have one of those ID numbers, you are able to check off a box that says you do not have any of those. But it is really important because if neither of those sections are filled out and the box is not checked off, then your registration might not be processed. So like Caitlin mentioned with the free photo ID, check in with your family. If you don't know what your social security number is and you don't have a North Carolina driver's license number, that might just be information that you need to get before filling out this form. One box that also isn't required on the form, but is something we really recommend filling out is the phone number and or email box. This is just going to help the County Board of Elections reach out to you if there are any issues with your registration, and it'll just make it a lot simpler and to get in contact with them if there's anything that you need to correct on that voter registration form. Without that, they will be relying on your mailing address. And I know for a lot of voters, and we can talk about this more in a minute, or for a lot of students, getting mail on campus can be weird. Your mailbox might not be located near your dorm. If you're on campus, you might have to go on, if you live off campus, you might have to go on campus to get mail and things like that. So providing phone or email does make it a lot easier to get in contact if there are issues. On the note of mailing versus residential addresses, there are two separate boxes for that on the registration form. So if you do get mail at a different address than your residential address, you should make sure to indicate a place where you can really reliably get mail on your voter registration form. And then one last note for first-time voters, when you may also need to provide a HAVA document if you didn't provide your driver's license or social security number, and then you go to present to vote. So we'll go over what those HAVA documents look like in a minute, but that is something like a utility bill or some other document that has your address on it. And that's only if you registered to vote before the driver's license or ID numbers were required. And like I mentioned, if you miss that October 11th deadline, there's still options to register to vote. You can register and vote on the same day during the early voting period. So again, that's October 17th through November 2nd. And you can look up where those locations and hours are using state board resources. Again, there might be one right on your campus. So if you know people who have missed that deadline and are like, oh, is there still a way for me to do this at this during the election? Yes, there is that whole period that they can go to same day register. Just like with going to vote, either by mail or in person, you're going to have to bring an acceptable photo ID. So that's one of those IDs on the list that Caitlin went over earlier. You're also going to have to provide some kind of documentation, either physical or an electronic document that has your name and your current residential address on it. And again, just really want to emphasize, it's important to provide an address where you can receive mail reliably. When you register using same-day registration, what is going to happen is the county board will send you a verification mailing to verify your address. And if that mailer can't be delivered, there is an additional process where the county board might reach out to you to confirm your mailing address and provide more documentation, or confirm your residential address and provide more documentation for that. And there's a chance that if that can't be cured, or if the mailer bounces back in a certain time period, that your ballot might not be counted. So to ensure that that is not an issue, make sure you're encouraging people to verify what their mailing address is on campus, provide a separate mailing address from residential if they need to, and also provide that phone number and email so that if that does happen to the voter where they can't receive mail from the county board, there are other ways to get in contact to cure that issue there. One other thing to note, if you're living on campus, a lot of schools and universities provide to their county board of elections template addresses or what those addresses look like. So they might have a list of the university or college housing list that denotes kind of how dorm rooms are noted if you're living on a campus dorm or something like that. Because we know that gets very specific, school to school. Everyone looks a little bit different. And then going over those HAVA documents, HAVA stands for the Help America Vote Act, and it's kind of shorthand for just a document that verifies your address. So it is a government document, government issued document that has your current name and address on it. That could just be your North Carolina driver's license if you have one, and that will also cover your photo ID requirement. It can be both. Other things that are acceptable in there that a lot of folks might have are a utility bill, government check, paycheck, things like that. I know these are sometimes harder for students to get those, so there are really helpful options for students living on campus. That could include a document from your school that has your name and address on it. So that could be something like an invoice from the school, your transcript, correspondence from the school. It might also include a printout or a screenshot of a portal on your school's website. So if you log in there and there is a page that has both your name and your current address and identifies the school website, you can bring a screenshot of that or present it digitally on your phone or electronically when you go to same-day register. One other option is if colleges, like I said, can provide the county board with a list of students living. So that will also suffice as a confirmation of your address if you also show a valid student ID card from that institution. One thing to note is that students at private school have to show a photo ID if they're using a school document as their proof of residence. This is a little bit different than if you go to a public school. Because a public school, any documentation from the school is considered a government document. There's not that added photo identification step. But if you go to a private school, you'll have to pair those documents together in order for that to be a valid document for this purpose. And then I will pass it back to Caitlin to just go over some tips for voting.
Thanks, Lily. And so, yeah, we just gave you a lot of information in terms of how the different processes that students will navigate, whether it's voting by mail, voting on campus, so through in-person or election day, and how to successfully navigate a voter photo ID. And I think as someone who has worked in election space in North Carolina since 2020, I think one thing that is really important when we're talking about student populations is making a voting plan. And so I know that may seem common sense, but many times what we hear from, especially in our work, Democracy North Carolina and Southern Coalition for Social Justice, are students or their parents contacting us the day on election day and either panicking or upset about, the poll worker said I can only vote provisionally because I was registered at my parents' address. And when we go through talking either with that student or their parent who is concerned, many times the issues that they are talking about to us on election day could have been resolved during early voting, could have been resolved if a couple of friends got together on a Saturday night and thought about, okay, we're going to make a voting plan. We're going to vote on this day all together. And then afterwards, I'm from Chapel Hill, so we could all go to YOPO. So I think it's really important in thinking about, do we all have a voter photo ID? What day am I going to vote? Do I have any exams on that day? Is there anything that is a deadline? thinking about these things in reality, because we know that life gets busy, and we might say, okay, we're going to vote on election day. Today is October 2nd. Election day is not till over a month from now. I've got plenty of time. Things happen, and so it's really important when it comes to voting, especially in North Carolina, that we make a plan to vote. And so I think one of the biggest things is, use early voting. That is a really going to be a great way for you if there is an issue, or you realize, I am not registered to vote and I thought I was registered, or I am registered to vote. I'm registered at my parents' house. I forgot about that. You can fix that during early voting through same day registration. It's also really important to use the campus site if you have one in your community. And the reason why that is important is in North Carolina, our lawmakers are trying at every step to make barriers for students to make their political voices heard. And so by using your campus voting site, it demonstrates to our lawmakers as well as our county officials that voting is important to students, and that we also are able to use our voices to stand up for their communities. We are a part of, you are a part of your campus community. Your lawmakers, should be accountable to you. And so by using your campus voting site, it encourages and stands up with your community. Another thing is, if you mess up on your ballot, that is okay. You do not have to continue to vote. You can ask the poll worker, for a new ballot. That is a right that everyone has in North Carolina. Or, for example, if you don't know or think, is this the right ballot? Or I have a question about the process of voting, or the tabulator, the machine that you put your ballot in at the end. You can ask the poll worker questions about the process. They are there to assist you and help you in ways. So that is always an option for you. Don't forget that. Another thing is, this election season, we are in North Carolina are going to have very big ballots. And when I say that, they're going to be three columns full of different election contests, as well as could be up to 3 pages. I know in Orange County, for example, our ballot is pretty lengthy. And so please take your time. A part of making a voting plan is researching and learning about the candidates on your ballot and whether or not they reflect and will represent the issues that you care about. Thinking about the climate crisis, thinking about affordable housing, thinking about livable wages. These are things that are directly tied to our elected officials. And so researching them before you get into the polling place will really make sure that you are voting for someone who aligns with your values and who will be accountable to you at the end of the day. Democracy North Carolina has a really great tool where you can put in your residential address and see exactly who is on your ballot and the issues that those candidates are concerned about. And you can take your phone into the voting place with you and use that as a guide as you are going through your ballot. So you don't have to go there alone or uninformed. You can bring information with you into the voting place. Another thing is just thinking about avoiding lines. If you know that I'm going to be voting at maybe 1 o'clock in the afternoon, but you have a class at 2:30, don't make the assumption that it's not going to be busy. We know from data that the best times to vote, especially for student populations, are mid-morning, so 9 a.m. to 11 a.m., or mid-afternoon, 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. So those are great times to catch voting when not everyone else is voting at those times. And then finally, just want to remind you of provisional voting. As we said previously, this is a fail-safe option. And so if you go to vote if you are unable to make that voting plan, or life got in the way and the voting plan, you are at plan B, and you're voting on election day, and maybe, for example, you weren't registered in the community, you thought you were, you would be given a provisional ballot, and it is your right to ask for one. And so we know, for example, that there is mis and disinformation, and I'll talk about this in a moment, related to provisional voting. But this is your right to be able to ask for a provisional ballot. And if you have any issues at all, you can always call or text 888 Our Vote. And so now I'm going to switch gears a little bit. And I think especially it's important for students and first-time voters to realize that you all have the power of the law on your side. And so knowing your rights around voting is really important to feel empowered and to help other people feel empowered as well as safe when they are voting. And so in North Carolina, state and federal law prohibits interference with the right of voters to participate in an election, whether that's through hindering access or preventing people from accessing the polling place, or whether it is outside of the polling place and making sure that there is a clear and indicated opportunity for voters to not be disturbed by folks who are outside, such as electioneers who may be asking you to vote for a certain political candidate. Knowing this information, especially as if you are a first-time voter, again, as we said, voting can be intimidating. And so knowing what to expect in your voting journey is important. And so one of the things that we can help equip you in this time is using this 888 Our Vote hotline. It will, if you call the hotline, you can ask any sort of question such as, where's my early voting site? Am I registered to vote? Is my student ID an acceptable form of ID? And you'll be in contact with myself or Lily, trained attorneys who can get you the right information. This hotline is also there if you have experienced voter intimidation, microaggressions from poll workers, or just have gotten a text message or maybe a letter where you're not sure is this from the state, who is this from. We can help make sure triage, the information that you've been provided, connect you with election officials who can help you, as well as make reports to the State Board of Elections so that this information is documented and can be stopped. And when we're thinking about the biggest thing, especially when it comes to student voters or first-time voters, is, as we've kind of said over and over again in this training, voting is complicated. And because it is complicated, there is an opportunity for bad actors or sometimes people who are trying to do good, but sharing incorrect information, and that is called mis and disinformation. In general elections, especially in 2024, this becomes a big topic and something that we really need to be thinking about. In North Carolina, too, we've had multiple lawsuits. So we discussed the digital photo ID lawsuit. There are also at least 6 other lawsuits pending in North Carolina. And that in and of itself, the way that sometimes the news reports these lawsuits can cause people to be concerned and misinterpret what is actually happening in these lawsuits. And so misinformation is typically described as false rumors or misconceptions about the election. And so this can be anything from, putting your ballot in the wrong scanner so it won't read, or for example, with digital IDs that is going on right now. So whether or not a digital ID is acceptable, there has been a lot of news reporting on this, and it just might not be clear to folks. Disinformation, on the other hand, we are thinking about someone's intent. Is someone sharing information for the sole purpose or intentional purpose of trying to mislead or prevent a voter from voting and utilizing their fundamental rights? In North Carolina, we are seeing a lot of robocalls, calling people and providing them with the wrong date of elections, targeting people related to the registration and the eligibility requirements of that. We're also seeing a lot of calls or information coming from the DMV in terms of, you have to pay an extra fee to register to vote. That is disinformation, and it can be really discouraging and cause people not to vote. And so if you have heard disinformation or misinformation, please call the hotline 888 Our Vote, and we can give you the right information and whether or not and get you on the right path. In helping voters against this, some things to think about. stop. If you have a text message that says, you are not registered or have been removed from the rolls, the purpose of disinformation is for you to act in an urgent manner. And so stop, think for a moment. You can go to the tool that Lily had mentioned and look to see if you are registered. You can call 888-OUR-VOTE or text us, and we can check to make sure that you are registered. Don't act in a hasty manner, because that is what disinformation wants you to do. Use early voting. Again, early voting is going to be that one-stop shop for where you can fix your registration and be able to have enough time before Election Day to make sure that your eligibility is updated. You can also use, as I said, the State Board's resources. Our State Board of Election has amazing resources on its website that can give you the right information. It also has a really great search tool. So if you just need to search a term, you can use the site that way. And then contacting your local boards of elections. North Carolina has 100 counties, which means we have 100 county boards of elections. You can contact them and ask them, hey, I got this letter from a third party that is saying that, I didn't request an absentee ballot, but I looked on ballot tracks and it says that, and I know I have requested a ballot. And the county boards of elections really want to hear that information so that they can either post on Facebook or social media, that this is something happening in their county and just to be aware. And so another thing too is document. If you have that text message, if you got a mailer from a third party, you received a robocall, please feel free to send a screenshot of it and text it to 888-OUR-VOTE. Because there are experts in North Carolina that are working to collect this information and document it to federal authorities as well as state authorities, so we can be tracking that and stopping it as it happens. And I'm going to turn it back to Lily, who is going to wrap us up with some really helpful resources to make sure that you can make that voting plan for voting.
Thanks, Caitlin. So I think we talked about a lot of different resources that are available to you to answer a pretty wide range of questions throughout the presentation. We wanted to put some of them together in one spot. Again, the North Carolina State Board of Elections website has all of this and a lot more. So that's always just a really great one-stop shop if you're looking for resources. Another resource that's available to you is the North Carolina Election Protection Hotline that we keep mentioning. That number is 888-OUR-VOTE. It's a free, nonpartisan hotline. With any question you have, you can call in and talk to an attorney, might be me or Caitlin or someone else on that hotline to get more information about what your question is or to verify something that you're confused about. Other resources are that voter lookup tool. This is a really, really helpful thing if you want to confirm whether you're registered, if you want to look at a sample ballot, all sorts of things you can find on that page. And it can put you in peace of mind if you are not sure if you've registered in time, if you're not sure where you can go to vote, your polling place might be or will be listed on there. So that's a really helpful resource that'll overview a lot of really common questions as well. Like I mentioned, both the early voting hours and locations and the election day polling place also exist on the state board's website. So if you're looking for where you can vote in your county for early voting, again, the hours and locations might be different county to county. There also might be different locations available during early voting that aren't available on election day. So using that resource to see what is most accessible to you during early voting. And again, you can go to any location during early voting in your county. And on election day, then you can look up your assigned polling place, and all of those will be open the same hours across the state. State Board also has a quick info sheet that summarizes a lot of topics for college students. So this overviews things about registration, same-day registration, photo ID, voting, all of that good stuff in about a 2-page info sheet. That is linked here from the State Board's website. They also have that searchable list of approved IDs, so student IDs as well as local and state government IDs. Again, it's searchable, so it's really easy just to put in your school and see if that is on the list. And then last but not least, SCSJ and DemNC both also have voting guides. The SCSJ guide has a lot of information again about those approved IDs, as well as a map where you can see those approved IDs on there. And the DemNC student voter guide goes over a lot of the same hot topics that we kind of hit today, with a lot of little tips throughout. So I want to make sure these are available for you as you kind of navigate the election season, and if there is more information that you're trying to find or you want to provide to students or the campus communities. So I think that is all we have today. I can turn it back over to Andy.
Awesome. Thank you, Lily. Thank you, Caitlin, for that wonderful presentation. Once again, I'll plug the hotline as well, that we keep on saying, 888-OUR-VOTE. It's a wonderful resource to just, like Caitlin said, triage any kind of voter problem that you are having. Thank you again for joining us. This webinar will be available on YouTube for you to peruse as you continue excellently reporting and observing and engaging with your local communities throughout this election season. With all that being said, thank you all so much and have a wonderful day.